Meredith Tharapos, and I'm here talking to Lucy Coward from SecondBite. And we're talking about budgets, Lucy. So can you tell me in what way budgets are utilised at SecondBite?
Budgets are everything. For us, beyond ending waste and ending hunger, for a not-for-profit, but for any organisation, having a solid budget and a budget process that sits behind it is absolutely key. So every dollar counts in a not-for-profit environment. So we use budgets to not only track what we want to do on a weekly, monthly and annual basis, but we will look at what we're doing year on year. So it guides all of our major decisions about how many people we want to employ, what we're going to spend money on, are we spending too much money on some things and not enough on others. It'll guide how many people we can afford to employ. It'll look at our capital expenditure, so how many trucks or warehouses we can afford to buy for the year. So pretty much every single decision that we make here is underpinned somewhere by a budget.
And can you tell me the process that underpins putting together a budget? What is the starting point?
The starting point for us is what are we doing now and what's in the landscape now. So for example, in the current environment, electricity, fuel, labour costs have all gone up. So we start with the big ticket items and see what's out in the macro environment and what might be impacting that in the coming year. And then we build up from there. So has our rent changed? Have we got more people? And we tend to do that section by section until we aggregate it up, and then we work out, does it balance?
Absolutely. And so you talked about the budgets underpinning decision making. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, for sure. So one of the major cost implications for us is around our capital expenditure. So things like our warehouses, our trucks, our forklifts, all the pieces of equipment that we need. We're a very cost intensive type of charity. So every year we go through a budgeting cycle and we go out to our donors and we ask them to help us for the year, and then we sit down and we work out what we can and can't afford to do of the strategy. So sometimes we can do all of it and a little bit more, and sometimes we have to make some crucial decisions. So we might want a larger truck, but we can't afford it this year and it needs to be next year. Or we can have half of it, so we still need to go out and fundraise for a little bit more. So it helps to underpin those major financial decisions that we have.
Thank you, Lucy. And what would be the forecasting like? How would you forecast what you need for the coming period? What would be the process of doing that?
We're a relatively steady business or organisation. So a lot of our costs are relatively fixed. So our rental costs are fixed each month. Our wage bills are pretty much fixed each month. Even our fuel bills. So in some instances, we're a relatively simple organisation when it comes to tracking month on month. The challenge for us is what underpins it. So for us, we look at revenue lines rather than sales lines. So we need to make sure, more so than what we're spending, but do we have the money in the bank? And if we don't, what do we need to do about it? So we're slightly different to a sales type organisation.
Yeah. And so what sort of budget cycles would you have? Typically, how long would they be and how would they fit together?
So we generally have 2 cycles for the year. We have the actual budgeting cycle, which is usually over a couple of months and maybe 3 or 4 iterations, depending on how complex our strategy for that coming year looks. And then we'll have a reforecast. So we'll generally do about March through to May in time for the end of financial year for our primary budget. And then we'll start in about December and January, hopefully when it's a bit quieter for the year, and have a look at, are we on track or not?
Mm-hmm. And then in comparing the budget to the actual figures and calculating variances, what would be the process for looking at the variances?
So generally, from a capital side of things, we're really simple. If we don't have the money, we don't spend it. So generally, we don't tend to overspend, but we have a very rigorous process to make sure that as we go through that expenditure, that we're matching up the funding to what we're spending in a week, so we don't overspend. On an OPEX and operational expenditure point of view, look, it really if someone's doing something out of line in terms of there's a cost come out of somewhere that we weren't anticipating, it's usually something that we're aware of in our organisation. So it may be there's a flood or a fire or a natural disaster, so we're spending more on fuel. Or there's been, the war in Ukraine, electricity prices have gone up, or fuel prices have gone up. So for us, there's not too many shocks in the system, but usually that's pretty explainable if we do have a variance.
So budgets really underpin the whole operations and the whole decision-making process right throughout the organisation at SecondBite. So thank you, Lucy. There's some very valuable insights on the use of budgeting within SecondBite.